Some houses never speak, yet somehow they remember everything. At the end of a quiet street in a small American town, there stood a house that had been there for more than 50 years. Its paint had faded with time. The porch leaned slightly forward as if it were tired. And the windows. They had watched more life than anyone realized. Inside that house lived a woman named Eleanor. Every morning, just after sunrise, Eleanor would sit near the window with a warm cup of tea resting between her hands. She didn't rush. She never did. She simply watched the street wake up. Cars passing, leaves moving gently in the wind, light changing on the walls. To the neighbors, she was just an old woman. Quiet, polite, forgettable. No one really knew her, and she never tried to be known. Eleanor's life had once been full of sound. There was a time when laughter filled the rooms, when footsteps moved quickly across the floor, when voices overlapped during dinner. Her husband used to hum softly while reading the newspaper. Her son would leave his shoes by the door, always forgetting to put them away. Those days felt far away now. Life, slowly and without warning, had changed its shape. Her husband passed after a long illness. Her son grew older, moved to another city, and built a life that no longer fit inside this house. And Eleanor stayed. Not because she couldn't leave, but because she didn't want to. People often confuse silence with loneliness. Eleanor was not lonely. She was surrounded by memories. Each room carried a moment, some happy, some painful, all meaningful. The kitchen still smelled like old mornings. The hallway remembered rushed goodbyes. The living room held evenings that never asked for anything more than presence. This house was not just where she lived. It was where her life had happened. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It came from the city office. The neighborhood was changing, roads were being rebuilt, old properties were being bought. The offer written on the paper was generous, enough to make anyone pause. Eleanor read the letter slowly. Then she placed it on the table and looked around the room. Nothing answered her, nothing needed to. Some decisions don't come from logic. They come from understanding. A few days later, her son visited. He talked about convenience, about better places, about how the house was old and how it would be easier for her somewhere else. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked at him gently. "This house isn't old," she said calmly. "It's patient." He didn't know what to say after that. Time passed, the street changed, the town grew louder, but the house remained. And one quiet morning, Eleanor passed away peacefully, just as she had lived. No noise, no struggle. Later, the town learned something unexpected. Eleanor had left the house behind, not to be sold, but to be turned into a small, public reading space. A place where people could sit quietly. Think, breathe. There was no large sign, no bold announcement, just a simple space, open to anyone who needed silence. Even now, if you walk down that street, the house still stands. A chair rests near the window. Sunlight falls gently on the floor. And if you sit there long enough, doing nothing at all, you may feel it. Some places don't need voices to tell their stories. They only need someone willing to listen. Not all meaningful lives are loud. Some are remembered through silence. They do not tell their stories out loud. They do not ask for attention. They simply remain, quietly holding everything that ever happened inside them. At the end of a narrow street in a small American town, there stood one such house. It was not large. It was not beautiful. And it was certainly not new. Its white paint had faded into a soft, uneven gray. The wooden porch leaned slightly forward as though it had grown tired of standing straight. And the windows, old and narrow, had watched more seasons than anyone could count. Inside this house lived a woman named Eleanor. Every morning, Eleanor woke before the world fully arrived. She did not need an alarm. Her body had learned time the way old clocks do. Quietly, faithfully. She would step into the kitchen, boil water slowly, and make a cup of tea. Not strong, not sweet, just warm enough to hold. Then she would sit by the window. Always the same chair, always the same view. The street outside woke gently. A car passed. A bird landed on the fence. Leaves moved without hurry. Eleanor watched it all without expectation. She did not check her phone. She did not turn on the television. She simply sat. To anyone passing by, she looked like just another elderly woman, filling time. But Eleanor was not filling time. She was remembering. There had been a time when mornings in this house were loud. Back then, footsteps echoed across the floor. Cabinets opened and closed too quickly. Someone always forgot something. keys, a jacket, a lunch bag. Her husband used to stand by the sink, humming softly as he read the newspaper. He hummed the same tune every morning, never realizing he did. Their son would rush past, already late, calling out a goodbye without slowing down. Those mornings felt endless back then. Now they lived only in the walls. People often assume silence means emptiness. But Eleanor's life was not empty. It was full in a way that could not be seen. Every room held a memory. The hallway remembered hurried goodbyes. The kitchen remembered laughter that came without reason. The living room remembered evenings where nothing special happened, and yet everything felt right. She did not walk through her house. She moved through time. Years passed the way they always do, quietly, without asking permission. Her husband's illness arrived slowly. At first it was small, forgetfulness, tiredness, a cough that lingered. Then one day, the house learned a new sound, the sound of waiting, waiting in hospitals, waiting in silence, waiting for answers that never came. When he passed, the house did not change overnight. It changed slowly. One chair was used less, one voice disappeared. One side of the bed remained untouched. Eleanor learned a new kind of quiet. Her son stayed for a while. He tried to help. He tried to be strong. But life pulls people forward whether they're ready or not. Eventually, he left. He moved to a different city, found work, built a life that did not fit inside this house anymore. Eleanor did not stop him. She never asked him to stay. Love, she had learned, was not about holding on. The neighbors changed over the years. Families moved in. Families moved out. Children grew up and disappeared down the road of adulthood. New people waved politely, but never stopped long enough to talk. They knew Eleanor only by sight. The quiet woman, the old house, nothing more. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It slid under the door quietly, as though it did not want to disturb anything. The city was renovating the area. Old streets would be rebuilt. Properties would be purchased. The offer was generous, enough to make anyone pause. Eleanor read the letter slowly. She did not react. She folded the paper and placed it carefully on the table. Then she looked around the room. The walls did not answer her. They did not need to. Some decisions do not come from thinking. They come from knowing. This house had witnessed her entire life. It had seen love arrive. It had seen love leave. It had held her grief without judgment. You do not trade something like that for convenience. Her son visited a few days later. He spoke kindly but quickly. He talked about better options, easier living, safer places. He talked about the house being old. Eleanor listened. When he finished, she spoke softly. "This house isn't old," she said. "It's patient." Her son did not understand, but he felt something shift. Time continued its quiet work. Construction sounds echoed farther down the street. The town grew busier, but Eleanor's house remained untouched. She kept her routine, morning tea, the window, the chair. Some days she remembered more. Some days she remembered less. But she always remembered how to sit still. As her body slowed, her mind wandered more freely. She thought about the small things, the way her husband used to squeeze her hand without thinking, the way her son's laughter once filled the stairs, the way life never warned you before it changed. She did not regret staying. She felt grateful. One winter morning, Eleanor did not rise from her bed. There was no struggle, no fear, just a quiet ending to a quiet life. The house held its breath. Afterward, the town learned something unexpected. Eleanor had left the house behind, not to be sold, but to be shared. She had arranged for it to become a small public reading space, a place where people could sit, think, rest,